101.3 KDWB. It's 8:05. We're doing something we actually thought was really cool, and we got some respectful feedback on it.
Yeah, I was actually impressed because the majority of sometimes people disagree. Usually they immediately go to anger and say bad things.
Right.
But I was actually like, people were very respectfully writing what they didn't like about it and not in a mean way.
We're doing the Baby Derby starting next week, and this is basically it's a fun thing where we have couples come in that are not pregnant but want to get pregnant, and then we say, okay, go have fun, and the first couple that comes back and tests pregnant is going to win $1,000 in baby furniture from Moss Envy, a local company that we're really proud of and excited about because they're more eco-friendly and they're not like a big corporation. They want to make sure that you're taken care of. So we did this with all the best intentions, and we started to get some feedback that we truly did not expect.
No, this when we came with this contest, it went through a bunch of people, obviously, and I don't think any red flags were raised about it.
Right.
And then so when we got it, we're like, we didn't even think about that.
And I got some samples. Here's one from Cassie. I don't normally write in, but I'm so bothered by the Baby Derby that I feel compelled to share my story. My husband and I have been trying to have a baby for 3+ years and have spent more than $32,000.
Wow.
The fact that you have made this a game or competition brought me to tears and made me not want to listen to your show anymore. I've been a loyal listener for over 20 years. I have memories of my mom and I listening to you as she drove me to elementary school. And she goes on and tells her story about how upsetting the Baby Derby is to her. Here is another one. This is from Angela. Heard on the radio this morning you discussing the Baby Derby bit in a bit more detail. I'm sure you've got many emails, etc. First, I want to say I'm a loyal listener to your show. I heard this morning there were some things that you might not have thought about. I am one of those statistics regarding infertility. So again, she goes on to tell
her full story,
very hard story, and we appreciate that. Those weren't the only ones we got in. Some were more supportive.
And
Here
some more heated, but some more supportive.
Tara Lynn says, I've listened to your show for the better part of a decade. I've never really participated much other than hearing a busy signal for random ticket giveaways. After all this time, I feel I got a pretty good handle on the core of the heart of your show. It just so happens I have a fairly close-up view of the issues of infertility and pregnancy loss. My husband and I have had the joy of getting pregnant pretty much on our honeymoon and also experienced the sadness of losing our first daughter 1 month before her due date.
Oh, man.
And she said, I'm actually writing for the first time to your show because I think Baby Derby is a great idea. Getting pregnant and having a child to raise is a wonderful and beautiful thing. And yes, at times a baby bump or a newborn crying can bring me to tears because she's been through this. However, it's important to remember that a baby or pregnancy is something worth celebrating. And hey, if people can win something for making love, then is there really anything more fitting than having this? It's worded a little bit weird, but she says, I can't speak for everyone, but I speak for myself. And I hope you guys go forward with Baby Derby. Not everybody agrees with her.
No.
I think it's all about empathy. And I want to tell you a story. When I was probably about 5 or 6 years old, there's brother and sister, Danny and Kathy, that lived down the street in Colorado. And they were fun and nice, and we were young at that age when boys and girls could play together. Yeah. You get to about third grade, and usually boys play with boys and girls play with girls. But when you're 5 years old, 6 or 7, you play together. And I remember Danny Smith on my first day of first grade. He was such a sweet kid. He was much older than me. He was 1 year older than me. He was a second grader.
Oh, yeah, he was wise.
And Danny Smith walked me to my first grade class because I was scared and nervous, and I got off the bus, and I didn't know where it was, so he walked me there, and I never forgot that.
Yeah.
And Kathy was fun, and we all played together and did kid things. Well, one day there was an accident at the Air Force Academy where their dad worked. And there was a gas explosion of some sort, and their dad was seriously burned. And I remember the mood around my house for days was very dark and somber, and a kid doesn't understand that.
No, of course
But my mom and dad were close to their dad's mom and dad.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so, okay.
So my mom and dad were very quiet and concerned, and it went on for a few days, and then their dad died.
Mm.
And I remember he used to pick him up at school sometimes. He had a dune buggy, which if you don't know what a dune buggy is, it's like a modified Volkswagen sports car. And it was so cool. And I got to ride in this dune buggy once in a while. And I remember, I'm going to choke up talking about this. The dune buggy, after their dad died, sat in their driveway in front of their house for weeks, for a long time. And I remember it being very conscious of the idea that this dune buggy wasn't being used anymore.
Yeah.
And Danny and Kathy were, of course, heartbroken. Their dad's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember feeling that mood, and they stopped coming over to the house.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was a little kid, 5 or 6 or so. I didn't understand why they didn't come over.
Yeah.
So they finally did come over. They came back, and I was so happy they came back, and they were there for a very short time. And I remember it so clearly. They were there for just a short time, and they left.
Yeah.
And I asked my mom, I was like, what, why did they leave? And she wasn't sure. So
Because you were expecting them to play. You were expecting it to be
back to normal.
Back to normal.
And you're 5. I mean,
Yeah,
I
of
was
course.
a little kid.
Yeah.
And so my mom called their mom, who had just lost her husband. And she said, yeah, Danny and Kathy were just over and they left. Are they okay?
Yeah.
And their mom said, no. It's too hard for them to be around Dave and his dad.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
It's too hard to see Dave, or they called me David back then, David play with his dad, jump up on his dad's lap, have his dad around. It's too hard on them. And at 5 years old, you don't know what empathy is,
No.
but you start to understand things like that. And that when somebody else is going through something, you don't understand it. You can't understand it. There's no way that I could ever understand what it's like for a little boy and little girl to lose their dad at such a young age. I can't understand it.
I mean, you're crying about it now, and this is something that happened
Quite a long time ago.
But that's
I
still,
remember it so well.
Yeah, you just feel
and
it.
I think at that time I learned what it is to understand when somebody's going through something that it's not your fault. And I remember thinking, it's not my fault. I didn't do anything.
Right.
And I don't know if it was my mom or dad that told me, it doesn't matter. You still have to be understanding. I didn't even know the word empathy, and I'm sure they didn't use it. You have to understand. So I think I learned empathy at an early age. I remember years later, one of my first radio jobs, the nighttime DJ was probably 30 years old. He had a little boy that died. The little boy was sick, and he died at 3 years old. And it affected his work. He would bring in a teddy bear, and he would set the teddy bear that his little boy used to have on the control panel in front of him.
Oh, gosh.
During a show. And the boss, our boss, didn't have kids and no empathy. And he went and talked to him. He said, yeah, I told that guy he's got to get his act together. He's got to get over it.
Oh, God.
And I thought, you don't have any idea what he's going through. You don't have any idea what he's...
in his mind, on his day.
Anything. You don't have any idea. How can you not give him a break? Give him a week off.
Right.
Give him 2 months off.
Yeah.
You don't have any idea. So fast forward, I think one of the reasons that people still put up with me here on KDLB after all these years is that I think that I hope that you sense my sense of empathy for people who listen to the show.
Right.
There are people who I've worked with here in this building who want to treat listeners like a number or something to be manipulated, and it really upsets me.
I can tell you firsthand that off the air, if something like that happens, Dave is the first person to go off and be like, look, we have built relationships with these people for years. And it's what I value about you, because you could just be like anyone else. You get sick of people. Like if you work in customer service, you get to that point where you're like, you're annoyed by everyone. Dave is not like that. Of course, there are occasions where people are annoying, but for the large majority, Dave would be like, you don't get to treat someone like that. You don't get to do that because we value them so much for listening to our show. So no, you don't get to do that.
And Dave would almost admit, and I'll say this for you, that you would almost admit this to almost to a fault, because just last week, because you care about like people listening to the show and the relationship so much. Last week we were talking about something, and Dave's daughter's getting married, and I said, "Oh, I don't know if we want to do that because we don't want to hurt Allison's feelings." And I don't remember the exact context, but Dave said, I was actually thinking about it because I wouldn't want to hurt a listener's feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And you were so concerned about like the listener, and it was just like one of those moments in my life where I'm like, that's how much you care about those people, is that you were thinking about someone that you don't even know and making sure that they know that you care.
Well, I appreciate that. I think it all goes back to, geez, guys, those two kids.
Yeah.
All those years ago.
So
when it comes back to the infertility issue, I can't tell you how to feel, and nobody can tell you get over it. Nobody can tell you that you should be okay with it, and I won't.
No,
I can only say, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, and we're not going to sit around and say, oh, everyone's so sensitive and blah, blah, blah. We're not going to, because I personally have friends going through this. Like, I had a friend who went through it, and she ended up adopting. I have friends who are currently going through it, getting the IVF, doing all the different treatments, talking about how insensitive people can be to them at times, and it's actually really shocking. But you said it best. None of us have dealt with it.
No.
So we didn't really understand, but we didn't read comments and emails and be like, oh, get over it.
No.
That was never a thought. I was like, oh, okay.
I can only say I'm going to do my best to understand how you feel. And when women and men, too, tell me about how the baby contest is upsetting to them, I'm going to listen and we'll work to understand. All I can ask in return is that you understand that we're only here to make people happy. And that's really nothing more. I'm not here to make anybody upset. But I think it's true that in going through life, we can't avoid but upsetting some people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's never our intention. And it's all about empathy. If the baby contest upsets you, I empathize.
Yes.
And that's all I can say. And I would say that next week when we're doing it, if you hear it, it's okay to turn the radio off.
Yeah.
If you don't like the baby contest, I know you don't want to take away somebody else's joy. I know people who've gone through this, that they avoid baby showers.
Oh, my friend, she got to the point where she couldn't, and she hated how angry she was.
Mm-hmm.
But she couldn't not be, and understandably so. And her best friend got pregnant so easily, and that friend was afraid to tell her because she felt bad about it. We have some texts I want to read really quick.
Okay, please do.
There's a couple of really
good ones. Yeah, we have commercials, but they can wait.
One thing, and I want to address this one. Someone said, I find baby derby problematic as a member of a same-sex couple. And I get that. But I also think there are lots of contests where some people just aren't eligible. And so that, like, I don't know, for instance, like this one, if you already are like in your 50s or whatever, you're done having kids, you can't enter.
Sure.
Or if you're young, you can't maybe. But then here's another one. We can definitely give sympathy to those who have difficulty with pregnancy, but that also means we're able to give happiness to those who do get pregnant.
Well said.
So I think that's well said. Also, someone said, we had some pregnancy issues, but that wasn't stopping us from wanting to register for this because the trying is the best part. And someone else said, feedback on baby derby. I'm not insensitive to people with conceiving problems, but it does not relate in my view. I'm permanently disabled. I can't sit, stand, or lay for up to an hour due to pain at times severe. I can't participate at snowmobile rallies, car shows, fishing contests, or even shopping. So I don't object because that's, you know what I mean? Like I can't do certain things.
Right.
But we try to be all inclusive for almost everything. We have events all the time that are only women can go. And guys are like, hey, why don't you have an event where guys can go? We have those too. So it's, I don't know.
I think that the big picture is that we don't and can't claim to understand the struggles and the pain of infertility. We can't. And we've talked to people about it. And Kate Raddatz told her very touching story, very powerful story on the radio a couple of months ago. But all we can do is say we will try to understand, just like we all try to understand each other. And I was fortunate enough to learn about that when I was a little kid. And I think it served me well. And I'm going to tell you, Steve and Falen are really empathetic, too. Especially Steve's got the biggest heart. Mm-hmm. He's the biggest buffoon in the world. Second biggest, actually, second. I say that in a loving way. But you got he really does have the biggest heart. And Fallon and I all know that. So anyway, I think we have expressed how we feel about it. And I will say again, if the baby derby is not your thing, I understand. Yeah. Although not totally, because I can't put myself in your position. but I can only understand that I'm trying to understand. And if you don't like it and don't want to listen, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. And thanks for listening to this. I'd love your feedback. Ryan Show at kdwb.com. Okay, so we were talking about the baby derby, and we had a really good conversation about it a little while ago. And we talked about empathy. And if you missed it, then I encourage you to, we'll put it on the website so you can find it. But I definitely want to get some feedback. We got a bunch of
texts, for sure.
Texts and feedback, too. Somebody said, as somebody who has struggled with infertility for 4 years, Dave, you made me tear up. Thanks for commenting on the baby derby, and thanks for being you. Love the show. Thanks, guys, from Stacy.
Yeah, and we have, I thought you were taking a phone call. Sorry.
Yeah, we do actually have some phone calls. We sure do. Corinne in Albertville. Hi, Corinne.
Hi.
Thanks for waiting so long, by the way.
That's okay.
What's up?
So, listening to your podcast every day on iHeartRadio, I encourage what you are doing. I am going to be 40 years old this year. Was told after several fertility issues and medical procedures that I would never have children. A little over a year ago, I was blessed with a miracle baby with my husband. A month ago, earlier this week, I found my daughter unresponsive in her crib, and she passed away from untreated influenza A.
Oh, my gosh.
So sorry.
Sorry.
Thank you. That night, I found out I was a month pregnant. So I'm dealing with a rainbow baby now. And looking at her things, thinking, okay, so KDWB is putting something out there that can help people, develop a beautiful life, because I'm going to have to start over. Most people would just do hand-me-downs, use it over again.
Mm-hmm.
I can't bring myself to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I applaud you for what you're doing, and I agree with what Dave said earlier. If it's hard for you to listen to that portion of the show, change the station, turn it down, put your headphones in, listen to something different.
And if you didn't hear me say that, I didn't say it in any way maliciously. I said I understand if it hurts to listen to that. It wasn't like, you don't like it, then turn it off, and that's not it at all. 'Cause I think, I think the key word today is empathy. And I think that is something that we all can get a little bit better at.
Yes.
And
exactly,
thank you.
100%. I empathize with everybody out there. I've been there. I've done it. Don't give up. Don't push yourself to do it. Just let it naturally happen. That's what I did. My husband and I finally, we threw our hands up and said, you know what? We're so far in debt, so far physically and mentally abused with trying, that we just said, forget it. And ta-da! We got pregnant.
Isn't it funny? It does work out that way sometimes.
Yeah.
Janet over in St. Paul. Hi, Janet.
Hi.
Thanks for waiting so long. What did you want to say?
Well, I was I've had a ton of drama and tragedy enter my life. It wasn't invited; it just showed up, and there it was. And when I was 18, I lost my dad very suddenly, and I remember his death day. And then I lost many relatives after that, and just made a point of it, a philosophy to not remember death days anymore. I just remember birthdays and holidays, and came up with this philosophy that happiness and heartache are two sides of the same coin.
Happiness and heartache are two sides to the same coin. What do you mean by that?
It's part of being a human and a human being.
Yeah.
You're going to have terrible things happen, but the next minute you're going to be laughing inappropriately, and then you're mad at yourself because you laughed inappropriately, and then you're judging yourself for being mad at yourself for laughing inappropriately.
I think that's true, and I think that we all know somebody who's going through, and maybe it's you that's going through something very tough right now. And we all talked to somebody yesterday who's going through some really hard times. And I didn't know whether it would be the right, appropriate time to say it, but I learned something when I was at Scout Camp last year.
Okay.
Remember I said, no hill goes up forever, or no path goes uphill forever.
Yes. Yeah.
Somewhere it's got to go downhill. Because I was hiking through New Mexico last year with the Boy Scouts, and they're all in good shape and 16 years old, and they're just blazing up the trail.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd look up and I'd be like, oh my God, it's still going uphill.
Yeah.
But then I remind myself, no hill goes uphill forever.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's kind of the same way in life. Hey, thanks for the phone calls. Thanks for the text messages. If you didn't get a chance to call in, that's okay. Maybe you don't want to call in, but maybe you want to send an email to ryanshow@kdwb.com. edwb.com. 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 edwb